the ages you coach. It could be 7v7, it could be 8v8, it could be 9v9, it could be 11v11. There are individual players out there, but they function as a group. And again, it's a team sport that we coach. And so to create a bit of a reference that ties in this overall team aspect in addition to the individual aspects, your players communicate on the field all the time. That communication happens between teammates. That communication happens between teammates and opponents, but that communication is constant. That communication is verbal and nonverbal. From a verbal aspect, and I'm sure you've observed this with the teams that you coach, one player passes to another player and they tell that player man on, or they tell that player to turn from a verbal standpoint. But the majority of communication that takes place is nonverbal. For example, the ball rolls into your goalkeeper and your center backs begin moving away or splitting from each other in order to create space. They're communicating to the goalkeeper, she or he has more time to make a decision. They're communicating to the goalkeeper, I'm available to receive a pass from you. Another example, if the ball gets played into a midfielder and the forward begins running down the field, he or she's communicating they're available for a pass and that they would like that pass. Defenders also communicate to attacking players. The ball gets passed into a midfielder, the defender begins closing them down, and they're communicating, you better make a decision quick or risk losing the ball. So that communication from a verbal and nonverbal standpoint happens constantly on the field. You as a coach, to enhance that communication of your team, you do that through tactics, through tactical agreements. If I do this, you do that. If you do this, I do that. So through tactics, you're trying to improve and make that communication more predictable within the team you coach. Once that communication happens and players interact with their surroundings and they collect information, the majority of that information, as we said, could be verbal, but the majority is nonverbal through their eyes. Those players on an individual level make a decision, and they make those decisions through their individual game insight. Once that decision is made, they then execute that decision, and that's where the player's technique becomes important. And as Jeff referenced, that technical application is happening all the time, given that we're all isolated now. So technique is important, but it's important at the third order, not the first order. That communication happens, then the decision, then the execution. And as you can see, that solid black line, that dotted black line, the communication, decision, and execution, that's a soccer action. What fitness is, because you don't want your players to make one action and then pack their bag and go home, you want them to make as many actions as possible for as long as possible. That's what fitness is. Fitness is communication, decision, execution, and then it again, and then it again, and then that block of three again. That's what fitness, soccer fitness is. So again, the communication within tactics is at team level, the decision-making and the execution at the individual level. The communication, which comes from, in this example tonight, Jeff, but when you get back on the field with your players, it comes from you. That's what players do on the field. The decision-making and the execution is how players do that on the field, because you don't want your players just to be robots. They have brains, they can think, and you want them to think for themselves, but how they perform what you want them to do, that's their decision. So as you begin thinking about how to implement a playing style with the teams you coach, that playing style is the starting point. The way you want your team to play, what you want your team to do, the individual players on your team to do, that's what's referred to as the playing style. It is, some of those decisions include whether you want your team to play direct or indirect, whether you want them to high press, or delay that press closer to the half line, inside their own half. Those decisions are completely up to you. And it includes the formation you're using. It includes all of those. And even more importantly, it zooms in a bit more in terms of, as that second bullet point shows, knowing what you want each player on the field to do, wherever the ball is on the field, and wherever or whatever actions your team is making, defending actions or attacking actions. That's the piece that we'll zoom in on a bit more tonight, on thinking about exactly what you want your players to do wherever the ball is located on the field. So what that playing style is, it creates a reference. It creates a reference for you to go out and coach your players. As a player, it answers the question for them, what will I do on the field? What will be the role and my responsibilities on the field? And that what, those tactical agreements, they help players understand how the team functions as a group. Again, that is what players do on the field. Why these things are important to you as a coach, they, from a coaching standpoint, they create, and Jeff, you will see this in a more practical setting later in the presentation, they create clear pictures in his head as to what he wants his players to do given whatever position they are within the formation he's implemented. So from a coaching standpoint, it helps you keep clear the information that you want to instill or impart to your players, rather than your thinking going all over the place and being a bit more random. From an assessment or an evaluation standpoint, this playing style, what you want your players to do, it allows you, from a coach on the sidelines, to assess if those players understand their role and responsibility in the formation. It provides a reference for you to evaluate those players, both in games and in practice, because the ultimate goal is for you, through these references, through these pictures in your brain, to create situations in practice that are as identical as possible as what those players will experience in the game, rather than those two situations being different, what they experience in practice being different than the game. That's not what you want. You want those two situations to be as identical as possible. So as you begin thinking about a process for determining a playing style with your team, obviously the players you have at your disposal, the qualities they have, their ability as players, those play a role. So some things to think about as you reflect on those players. How much experience, and this is almost irrelevant of age, how much experience they've had learning certain formations plays a role. The majority of teams, as you observe them play, the majority of formations that coaches use is 4-3-3. So the majority of the experience that players have is within 4-3-3. If you as a coach, after assessing the ability and the qualities of your players, think 3-5-2 would be best for them, no problem. But knowing that those players may not have a lot of experience with 3-5-2 will give you some, as you reflect, some chances to do some pre-work, have some conversations with them to increase their comfort level with this change as much as possible. Because all of your players identify their abilities as soccer players in a certain way. Some enjoy being closer to goal. Some enjoy being further away from the goal and take more pride in defending than scoring. As you reflect on your players, some enjoy and have a higher comfort level in the middle of the field. Some have a higher comfort level because of more time and space on the side of the field. Thinking about the group of players as a whole, do you have more defenders than midfielders? If you have a higher number of defenders, maybe playing 3 center backs is better than just 2 center backs. If you have a majority of center midfielders on your team, maybe using a diamond in midfield rather than 3 midfielders allows you to get more of those top players on the field. All of those things impact your playing style as a team. And obviously, if you're going to be the inferior team versus the superior team in most games, those also have an impact. As you begin, after assessing the qualities and abilities of your players, and number one and number two do go hand in hand, to think about the formation you're going to use in order to give your players the most advantage they can have. What formation your opponents play. The opponent's formation plays an impact on possibly what formation you may use, because every formation has a positive and a negative, an area of strength and weakness. And so setting your team up to take advantage of whatever formation, the weaknesses in the formation of your opponents is important. Within that playing style, and again, thinking about those players more as a group than individuals, right? What the role of your goalkeeper will be. Will your team build up from the back? Will they be more direct in the buildup? Do you have a goalkeeper that can participate in the buildup? From a defending standpoint, as we said, pressing or delaying that press and dropping off a little bit more. Do you have players that can attack through the middle of the field? Are they better attacking on the side of the field? Will you create tactical overloads in the middle versus the wing? Will you create those overloads in the middle of the field coming out of the back? Will you do it in the midfield? Every team in the world uses width, but your team, as a coach, thinking about your players, how you get the width is your choice. You could get it through your fullbacks. You can get it through wingers. You can get it through player rotations. How you do it to set your team up the best is important. And as we said, every formation has positives and negatives. So within numbers 3 and 4, again, you have your group of players. Within the playing style you pick, you do so, and the formation you choose, you do so to enhance all of the positive qualities that your players have. And so thinking about the players you have and the formation you choose, yes, those go hand in hand. But at some point, and as you can see under number 3, at some point you fit players into that formation. There may be a player, he could be one of your better players in the top 11, who has been a winger all his life, but you already have 3 or 4 wingers that are good players also. So maybe that player is better served as a fullback within that formation. So there is a degree of fitting players within the formation you choose. So what Jeff will get into, in his head, here's a picture of, and Jeff's team are the blue triangles. Here is a picture in Jeff's head when he decides to press and disturb the buildup. And he has this in his head before he steps onto the field to train his teams. He has this in his head before he sets up this tactical awareness training with his team. He has in his head exactly the actions he wants each of those blue triangles to make. This picture on your computer screen is one still picture, but eventually, you know, red number 4, the right center back, is possibly going to pass to the left center back, red number 5. That's a whole new picture in Jeff's head, or in your head as the coach, to think, what do I want my players to do when the ball is at the left center back, red number 5? You have all these pictures in your head, whether the ball is at red number 2, red number 6, red number 3, or any red player. You have a clear picture in your head as to what actions you want those blue triangles to make, regardless of where the ball is on the field. Eventually, because you don't have all 22 players at practices to train, eventually you have to use simplifications of the 11 versus 11. And if you only have 19 players at practice or 20 players at practice, maybe you play 10 against 10 or 8 against 8. And if you're playing 8 against 8, as your defenders become better, you want to begin to overload those defenders to make them and stretch their boundaries as defenders. So instead of 8 against 8, you may play 7 against 8 or 6 against 8. If you have higher numbers at practice, again, to stretch those defenders to make them better in terms of the actions that they make as a group, you may play 8 against 9 rather than 9 against 9. Because eventually, as Jeff will show, he has this picture in his head as to what he wants all 10 field players and the goalkeeper to do. But you may go out to practice having a great session planned for 15 players, and because one or two players didn't update their team snap or something unexpected came up, now 15 players turns into 13 players. But you have identified pressing and disturbing the buildup with these actions. Whether you have 13 players or 15 players, this is what you thought was the most important thing to do. So having these clear pictures, not only the actions of the blue triangles at 11 against 11 in your head, but also what it would look like in training, so that when you have 15 players or 13 players, that those players, as it shows on the screen, are making the same actions, whether they're playing 7 versus 8, 5 versus 7, or in this case, 11 versus 11. So the takeaway is having a clear idea of what you want your players to do before you go out to the field. And Jeff will show, having these clear pictures, how he can communicate more clearly and more concisely the roles and responsibilities of his players. So Jeff, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, fantastic. I will share my screen and kind of get the next section of this presentation going. Okay, so just to set the stage as to what happened, again, I was working with high school aged girls in this particular situation, and our goal was to give them some additional information, some references that we could take back out onto the field once we get back out onto the field with them and keep them learning and developing. So I started out with a quick meeting with the girls, and we had, to set it up, we had had about 8 or 9 training sessions, and we had worked through a bunch of defensive tactical principles that we were concerned with. And we had the girls, I had the girls in our first Zoom meeting that was not that long, just brainstorm. Tell me what tactical principles we've gone over that we've discussed. And they came up with this list here. Get compact, stay compact, pressure, cover, balance, get organized, pressing, work as a unit, and stay connected. Those were the majority of them. Those are the tactical principles they came up with. I then went and just picked a YouTube video of Germany versus Mexico from a couple of years ago. I did use the tactical view because it's a little bit easier to look at. And I sent them the link to that and had them identify the formation that each team was playing so they could set themselves up to understand what they were looking at. And then I gave them these instructions that they would watch and analyze the game, looking for the tactical principles that we've covered thus far. They needed to find 4 of those moments for 4 different principles, and they were to timestamp them so that when we met the next time, we would be able to go through and pick players that could give me a timestamp, which I'll illustrate in just a little bit, and they would be able to talk to us about that particular moment. Now, Mike had alluded to the fact that we want all of our players to be able to understand that in this particular moment, this is what not just one player does, but all of the players on the field. In this setting, because this was our first session of doing this, I focused a lot on just the specific principles. In our next session, what we'll do is we'll go back and have them expand a little bit, zoom out, so that they can explain what other players are doing in those moments as well. Okay. And then just as a reminder, I gave them again, the definition of a soccer action: communication, decision-making, and execution. Okay, so that was an email sent out to them. They prepared their 4 moments, time-stamped it for me. And then I went in and I had the video up, and as I played the video, I shared my screen with the girls, and they gave me moments to illustrate. I'll give you the first one. And again, this was high school level. You can do this. There are videos out there for 7v7, 9v9. You can find anything that you want on the internet. So you can apply this and just massage it any way you need to fit your environment. And I'll show you a handful of clips just to kind of let you know how the process went for us. So let me find the first clip here. You'll hear the girls talking a little bit and giving some explanation, and then I'll pause it and give you a little more. You have one other you want to show?
Sure.
Okay, what's the timestamp?
Like 8.
8 minutes. So Germany has the ball.
We're looking at Mexico's defense.
Mexico's-
Right. You can see them all like lined up, the Mexico back line.
So here,
Yeah, those 4. And then as the ball switches the field in the next like few seconds, they stay in shape.
so I'm just going to pause it there for a second just to kind of give you what we were looking for. Here's a player that is a center back for us, and she is looking and identifying a moment when the ball is near the opponent's goal, and this has forced her, this analysis that we asked her to do has forced her to take her eye off of the ball and look around the field, which all players should be doing anyways, scanning the field to gather information, which is the form of communication. And a lot of times we see our players, and we as coaches, sometimes we get caught up in those moments, we become spectators. So this gave them a great opportunity to look away from the ball and analyze. And she was talking about their back line, Mexico's back line, which is in green here and attacking this way. I'll let it roll a little bit. So the ball's going to shift here. Watch the defensive shape. If you think about when we got the rope out and we were moving together, just to illustrate what connectivity is, and moving as a unit, that's what this would be right here. Okay, and just to explain a little bit about the reference of a rope, what we've done with the players in the past, very young is all the way up through high school, is at times to get them to understand that concept and principle of staying connected and moving together as a unit, is we get a rope out and we stretch it across the back 4 players, and they hold that rope taut. And we will place players directly across from them on the training field, here, here, and here, and we'll push the ball along this line. And as that ball moves, they are forced to move, to slide and pressure. And naturally, if the ball slides this way, this player will start to track that, and consequently, all of these players will move together in unison. And you'll get to see that here. And this is what that player recognized, that was the picture, that is the player action that we wanted them to perform, and them as a unit to perform. Just watch the back 4. I don't know if you caught. Okay. And then what I did is I went ahead and I took the opportunity, because if you use Zoom, you have a chance to draw, and we made a couple of still shots and frames that we wanted to help illustrate what we were doing with the kids. Again, this is another imprint on them. They're downloading this information into their brain. For our kids, they're visual learners. This is a great opportunity for them. So the blue lines and arrows illustrate that 3, 5, 4, and 2 are all connected together. And they also have this connectivity to the next line above them, up the field, higher up the field, which is their midfield line. I highlighted the defensive principles, which were to stay connected, move as a unit, get compact, and stay compact. I can also email this information out to them so they have it. Our kids keep journals, and they would more than likely print that and then have that for their reference. And then in the same spot of the game, there was something else that I noticed that I wanted to bring up, and I will let that roll. And this is just another opportunity for you as a coach to highlight something that's important to you I'll rewind it, but I want you guys to watch this player here. When he starts back here, I want you to look and see what he does. Okay, let me back it up just a little bit. Watch that player. It's a little hard to see. If you look at it, though, you can see. All right, so the back four are getting in shape right now. Just start shifting. Watch this player. Did anybody notice what he did?
Face the way the ball was going.
And what else?
He tucked to the middle.
He what?
Tucked into the middle.
Okay, he did that too. What else?
He like shifted his head to make sure his outside back was moving with him.
Yes, who said that? I can't tell who that was.
It's Jill.
Very good, yes. I'm gonna rewind that. I want you to watch because that's the number one thing. Okay, to go along with that, I went ahead and made a slide up for that. Oh, wrong one, sorry. All right, I may have misplaced that slide. I'm not sure where that one is at the moment. Let's try this. No, okay. Anyways, I made a slide up and it really just had to cover and go over with the players, how important scanning was. And that was another level of communication that and how important that is for us in order to work together. The next piece is a pressing moment.
Seven.
Okay, and tell us what we're gonna see.
The German number 9.
This player?
Yeah.
Okay.
They'll Mexico play it back to the 4, and then the German number 9 clearly cut the field in half, so they couldn't play it to the other side. Yes.
Yep, let's check it. Watch. Yeah, that's a great illustration right there. Again, take a look at the body shape of that player. He's really telling him, this player, you're not coming this direction. You're not coming to the big part of the field. When we start talking to you guys from an attack perspective, we're going to talk to you about trying to find the big part of the field. And most of the time when a ball comes from one side to the other side, comes in here, the space is going to be over here on this part of the field where there clearly is a lot more space. So let's rewind and watch that again. And then pay attention to, again, this little section of the field. How many of our players are in that space? Germany, 1. Okay, I'll show you a screenshot there that I did for the kids. This is basically what that player was talking about in her explanation. This is something that we worked on in training over a couple of different training sessions, and how important this initial press is. The body shape and angle of approach gives them the ability to cut the field in half. And then a couple of defensive principles that we like to work with our girls is to defend in smaller and more predictable, smaller areas, and make it more predictable for all the players around them. So again, we illustrated this, forces the Mexico player to come back into this space. And the next slide will show you what we were talking about specifically. Here, because we forced that player not to come to the big part of the field here, we were able to get 8 of our defenders into this area of the field. And again, the defensive principles here is to get compact, stay compact, and defend in small spaces. So again, visually giving them another opportunity to download this information into their brain and use it as a reference as we move forward. Okay, I'll take you to the next moment. Rachel.
753.
7:53. What are we looking at?
Pressuring.
Here's
Like
7.
pressing.
Which team?
Mexico. I think he's like the number 10.
And number 10. So up in this space here.
Yeah, like the goalie plays the ball and he like goes after it.
Okay, let's watch.
Yeah, like right there. He made the goalie go back instead of like being able to make that play go forward.
The goalie goes back.
Or no, like the player had to play back to the goalie because the like 10 was like pressuring, so he couldn't play it forward.
Yeah, the good hard pressure.
Yeah.
Watch this player right here.
Great thing.
Yeah, that's good. That's the pursuit of the ball that we're looking for. When we commit to going forward and getting the ball, we have to make sure that we're pursuing at that pace and be committed to getting in there. Yeah. Okay. And then the slide that we brought up and made for the players were, again, describing the 8 or 10 of Mexico pressing the German defender, forces the ball backwards, and that's a cue for players to press. Mexico's back line recognizes that cue, and they press forward into negative space. Negative space is a term that we use with our players. They're familiar with it. It's when the ball goes backwards, and that is a cue for us to move forward into press. Okay, so those are a few examples of player-initiated instances and moments that they found. The last one I'm going to show you is something that I was watching. This moment came up during our training session, one of our early training sessions specifically, and it just fit perfectly into what we were talking about. So I wanted to take an opportunity to highlight for that for our players, and I'll roll this and we'll chat a little bit about it. Cover balance, okay? And then 608, I think Gabby's, let me go back to where Gabby was. Oh, hold on one second. I'm a little bit off there on my time. Make that step forward or back to the ball and watch this player. He's going to go back into the midfield to get a ball. Watch this player. Here's the 3. Here's the 5. The 4, I would actually like to see the 4 more into this space here and then have this one tuck in a little bit more perfectly. But so in order to help them understand that picture a little bit better, I've made this slide for them. And this is our preferred team shape at the moment, at this moment, based on the roles and responsibilities or our style of play, how we want to play. I have seen coaches and worked with coaches that prefer in this part of the field not to send one of their backline players into the midfield to track this player. They'd rather have them sit in this space and hold the line the way that we chose to play. In particular, in this moment, is that we want our back to step with them to deny that player the ball and make them play out wide or backwards so that they are not facing up with us. So I wanted to take this opportunity to show our players that this is our preferred place. I would rather have this player slide out, the 4 slide in, the 2 slide over, and our 7 drop in even a little bit deeper and help cover some of the space in here. Again, it's more compact, it's better cover if this ball were to get in here, if we had a player here to cover and a player here to cover. So that was a moment that I showed them, and then I'm gonna let the tape roll so you can see that. Watch what happens. Okay. You guys see that? So there again, here's that triangle, pressure to that player, cover, cover, balance, the back 4 right there. Okay. Any questions about? And then the last slide that I'll show you is to illustrate again what we're looking for. So it's very clear in their head that this is the line that we were holding together. Our defensive unit was working along this line. As this number 9 from Germany slid back into the midfielder, our 5 took that information in, stepped with that player, and then our players Again, the blue arrow is showing the connectivity with them. That's the picture we wanted our kids to see, and that came out clearly in one of our training sessions, and I wanted to highlight that for them. So as coaches, you know, yes, the girls were interactive. We were asking them to think and to help guide us through this training session based on the principles that we've covered. And I thought they did a great job in an initial session with that. But that's not to say that I, as a coach, can't insert some of my own thoughts and some of the things I wanted to cover in that session as well. Again, the topics can range. For those of you who've done U.S. soccer coaches courses, you know that we talk about the 6 key qualities of players. You can do training sessions revolving around the 6 key qualities of the players. For example, one of them is to read and understand the game. You can ask the players to find those moments and illustrate those to us or to their teammates. If you have principles of your own on either side of the ball or in transition, you can use those moments and use that as a requirement for the players. But overall, this is just something different to engage them and activate them in a way other than with just technique. Okay. And I think that our kids, you know, to get them to that next highest level, we've got to ask them to do some higher level thinking. And this is what we came up with. If you have questions, I would go ahead and open up the chat. If you want to put anything in there, Mike and I will get an opportunity to answer any questions that you might have. Also, if you want to email myself or Mike to ask questions, that's no problem at all. We'd be happy to answer anything that way as well. Let's see, we've got a couple of questions coming in. Let's see. We are going to post this. Someone was wondering if we're going to be able to get this for other people in their club. And yes, we will. Definitely will post this video. I'll send out an email again to all the MYSA coaches, letting them know where that will be, probably on the MYSA website under the coaching tab. So just watch for that. Another question was specific video software to create the videos. There was nothing really. What I did is I pulled up the YouTube and I pulled that game up as we were going through it with the players, and I was sharing my screen. So when I did that, I was able to freeze it and pick moments that the players wanted to. And then again, that Zoom has that drawing capability. Let me share my screen again and I'll show you where that is. So up at the top here, if you just hover your cursor over the top, this will pop up, and then you will have an opportunity to draw. You can use any of these tools up here. For example, if I wanted to highlight a player with the ball, I can do that. You can draw. You can put text on there. The arrows, you can just show arrows this way. It's very simple. You want to take something off the screen. Somebody's playing with it right now. So no software specifically. It was YouTube and Zoom. All right, let's see what else. Any other questions here? I made the slides for the session. Somebody wanted to know when I did that. After the girls and I went through and I identified some of the moments that they wanted to share with us, I took notes as they were doing that. And then I went back and shared them with the players afterwards. We reviewed and I showed them some specific moments. It was much quicker that time. So it was really a 3-session kind of activity, a quick meeting to explain the assignment and give them the tape or the video to watch. Then they came back together as a group and shared that information. And then we went back and reviewed it. And I just highlighted and showed them the still slides that went with it. And that was quicker than this, the other session. I did a long session with them, the middle session when they were all sharing. I would probably limit that because it went a little bit long for that group. So, because I gave everyone a chance to give at least one moment. Any other questions? I'm just checking the chat box. Okay, that is it. I hope that this gave you, on behalf of MYSA, thank you very much for tuning in and taking part in this. Mike and I are going to be doing a follow-up session, and we will let you know, and we'll do it the same way. We'll let you know when we're going to do it, what the topic's going to be. I've got somebody lined up for next week that's going to talk a little bit about periodization. Kirk Nelson, he's the associate head coach for Missouri State women's soccer, and he's a U.S. scout as well as a U.S. region coach. So he'll be doing periodization, and at a level that it will apply to the majority of us that are here coaching in a club environment, that hopefully everybody could take some information away with them. So thank you again for MYSA to take part. Yep.
If you don't mind, I'll show that last slide.
Absolutely.
Guys. We had talked about what does this look like when you only have a shorter number or a smaller number of players. And so on Tuesday, April 14th, I'll be going through that specific tactical principle of disturbing the buildup. You using a 4-3-3 because most coaches use or play some version of 4-3-3, and most teams play against opponents that use 4-3-3. So what I'll be doing on Tuesday the 14th is going through these methodological steps as to what this would look like at 7 versus 7, 7 versus 8, 9 versus 10, so that all these players are making the same actions. All right, I'll be going through a presentation on Tuesday, April 14th from 6:30 to 8. It'll be on Zoom, so there'll be an invitation sent out. I've sent an email out to as many coaches that I have a distribution list for. My email address is right there. I'll also put this in the chat. If you haven't received an email with that invitation and you would like to be a part of it, just send me an email and then I will email that invitation back to you. And again, that will be on Tuesday, April the 14th from 6:30 to 8.
All right. Thanks for putting that out there, Mike. We appreciate it. I've sat through those courses with Mike, those classes, and they do a great job. So I highly encourage you to participate in that if you can. And again, watch for upcoming sessions like this. And thank you very much. Hope you can take some of this back to your club and give this a try with your players. I know we're doing this with our Olympic development program coming up later this month. And when we told the parents what we were going to do, they're excited. They're excited for the kids to get a different look at something to do and occupy them. So in any case, stay safe, everybody, stay healthy, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Mike. I'll hang out here for a minute or two, see if there's anybody else that has questions.
Ciao. Good job.
Looks like, hey, how are you, Alex?
Good. Thank you. Bye.
Good. See you later. It looks like someone's trying to send one question in. I can't really see what it was. Chris, if you want to resend that, I don't know exactly what you're asking. Oh, yes. Is it recorded? Yes, we did record this and we are going to post this. We'll let you know via email where this is, where we'll post it. More than likely it will be on the, MYSA website under the coaching tab.